returning onto the circuit and stopping on the track once more, this time without restarting. Yuki later explained that he was ready to abandon the car when it halted for the first time, so undid his seatbelt partially, assuming that his race was over. However, this was not the case, so the Red Bull Junior driver was forced to pit again to have his belt retightened and blamed a clear issue in the data for his eventual retirement, which was later revealed as a differential issue. Consequently, the virtual safety car came out and Max Verstappen was able to pit without falling behind Lewis Hamilton, denying fans a brilliant battle for the lead in the last few laps. Both Hamilton and Russell pitted as well, meaning that Max Verstappen retook the lead and seemed to be sauntering into the sunset. As one may have deduced, there was no sympathy towards Yuki Tsunoda from Mercedes fans, some of whom compared this incident to Crashgate, citing its mysterious nature as a highly suspicious move, which may have been orchestrated by Red Bull to snatch the win from the Mercs. This is not my personal opinion, firstly because of timing issues, as to have communicated this type of message to their sister team in such a short time span would have been exceedingly difficult, and to have organised it prior to the race would have been almost impossible, due to the lack of likelihood that a Merc would be leading from 4th and 6th on the grid. Furthermore, there's a question of motivation. Max Verstappen has already all but won the championship, and losing his home victory would not have been the end of the world. Anyway, back to the racing, and after only 5 laps without incident or accident, Valtteri Bottas broke down on the entry to Turn 1, bringing out the full safety car this time and requiring all teams to funnel through the thin pit lane so that marshals could safely clear the stricken Alfa Romeo, whose 3rd retirement this is in 6 races. Verstappen and Russell took the opportunity to pit, leaving Lewis in the lead, on far slower tyres, with a safety car pulling into the pits. Flashbacks, anyone? And on lap 60, inevitably, Max Verstappen pounced upon Hamilton immediately, out-dragging the Brit into Turn 1 for the lead. So the fate of Max Verstappen may have been sealed, but that of the 2 Mercs was definitely not, as George Russell nearly collided with his teammate on the start-finish straight on lap 64, whilst making the move work on his compatriot down into Turn 1 for 2nd place. Lewis was absolutely fuming about the lack of strategy prowess from his team, and the situation only worsened 2 laps later, as Charles Leclerc moved into the podium places as well. So, from leading the race, Lewis now had to settle with his starting position of 4th. So Max Verstappen made himself the first driver to win 4 in a row since Lewis himself 2 years ago, extending his lead over Charles and Checo, who are now tied on points to 109 points in the World Drivers' Championship. Now, if Max outscores Perez and Leclerc by 41 points or more within the next 2 races, Max will have won the championship by Singapore, wrapping it up with 5 races remaining. George Russell equalled his best finish in the sport, that podium in a rain-soaked Spa a year ago, with 2nd, claiming his 6th podium of the season and moving him ahead of Sainz in the standings, and back into the contention for 2nd place in the championship. Charles Leclerc also claimed only his 6th podium of the season, despite having been a championship challenger at the start of the season in Bahrain, while Lewis Hamilton made it the first time he's finished a race without a trophy to take away since Baku. Now onto the rest of the grid, and Sergio Perez rounded out the top 5, while Carlos Sainz found himself down in 8th. Carlos almost made contact with Lewis Hamilton at Turn 1, but managed to maintain 3rd place, and both himself and Checo pitted on lap 15, Checo taking the fastest pit stop of the season with 2 seconds flat, while Carlos Sainz had one of the slowest pit stops of the season that was organised with a time of 12.7. The mechanics had been informed that Carlos was coming in on only the penultimate corner of the racetrack, leaving them with very little time to get the wheels ready. And, as one might have expected, the left rear tyre had not even come out of its blanket by the time Carlos pulled into the box, proving the shambolic nature of the Ferrari strategy team, showcasing, in fact, once more. To add to this mess, as Ferrari team principal Mattia Binotto put it, the left rear mechanic left the wheel gun in the pit lane, and Checo ran over it while exiting his box, almost putting an end to his race. Carlos made up a lap on the yet-to-pit Williams of Alex Albon on lap 20, and Checo pitted once more on lap 41, this time without drama, as the Mexican made up a place on Lando Norris on lap 44 for 8th, as Carlos himself pitted as well. Checo went for the 3-stop on lap 49, as Sainz ran into trouble with the stewards, overtaking Esteban Ocon just before the yellow flags that came out for Valtteri Bottas's retirement. There were, however, a number of tense laps behind the safety car in which Carlos Sainz was nearly forced to give the place back. Carlos also went for the 3-stopper as the safety car was going through the pit lane on lap 51, being released directly into the path of compatriot Fernando Alonso and accruing a 5-second time penalty for an unsafe release. The Spaniard managed to reach back into the top 10 on the road with a lap 60 overtake at turn 1 on Perez, but he was unfortunately dropped to 8th. And this promoted Checo to 5th, the Red Bull driver still yet to see the checkered flag outside of the top 5. And this helped to tie him on points with Leclerc as well. Splitting the two was Fernando Alonso, who secured his 4th top 6 finish in 6 races, recovering expertly from his poor grid spot of 13th, with some nifty early passes on both AlphaTauri drivers. And Lando Norris, who took his 11th point finish of the season, built his tally to 81 in the standings. Esteban Ocon was in 9th for the 2nd year in a row in Netherlands, having also recovered from his qualifying disaster early on, gaining 3 places in the opening lap. Alpine maintains that it should have been an 8th, as they claim that Carlos Sainz should have been reprimanded for passing under yellow flags conditions, an incident which I talked about earlier. Lance Stroll rounded out the top 10 for the 5th time this season, having moved up 2 places at lights out, then falling back in the pits, which ties him on points with Yuki Tsunoda, whose suspicious DNF means that he is now in a 9-race points drought. Like Lando Norris, Pierre Gasly finished where he started, in 11th, still not having scored points when his teammate has retired this season, followed by Alex Albon and Mick Schumacher, who was unable to capitalise on his excellent qualifying position thanks to backpedaling at the start of the race, as well as facing a 10-second pit stop on lap 14, which dropped him to 18th place. He did, however, engage in some clean and skillful battles with compatriot Sebastian Vettel, who finished in 14th. K-Mag completed the Vettel sandwich, having fallen to the back of the field thanks to a battle with Alex Albon, which resulted in a tap to the barriers at turn 4, which nearly resulted in his retirement from the race. And Zhou followed, the Chinese driver not having finished in the points now since Canada. Daniel Ricciardo capped off his horrendous weekend with 17th place, and Nicholas Latifi was the last of the finishers for the 2nd weekend in a row. Now, I'm going to do my driver and team of the race at the same time, and I'm confidently giving this one to Fernando Alonso and Alpine. The veteran Spaniard has not stopped scoring as of late, with 10 points finishes on the bounce, and this is one of his best. After P12 and P13 on the grid, no one expected Alpine to score a significant amount of points today. But Fernando Alonso sprinkled on some of his magic, carving through the lower half of the midfield with ease, as his teammate did the same. and playing the strategy to perfection to come away with yet another top 6 finish. Esteban Ocon also should have been further up the field as well at the end of the day. From what I saw, I think that the Frenchman deserved that place on Carlos Sainz. And with 5 double points finishes in a row, it seems that the only way is up for Alpine. Finally, for my struggle of the race, and it's Carlos Sainz. Carlos seemed to be cruising to an easy podium initially, but his pit stop blunderclass meant that he was out of contention before lap 20. And, as we know, in an attempt to negate the consequences of this stop, even more controversy came his way, with that debatable overtake on Esteban Ocon, and the 5-second time penalty for an unsafe release, dropping him to 8th. This was just not the day for Carlos Sainz once more, and the multitude of incidents that were not his fault again highlight the need for change within Ferrari's ranks. Thank you for listening to F1 Every Week. Tune in next week for a review of the Italian Grand Prix, the final leg of this European triple header.